Hey guys, today we're going to be doing a video about setting up a GitHub repo that contains a Kodi repo that you can host on GitHub and make it available to the public inside Kodi. That way you can distribute out your own add-ons that you make, or distribute out a wizard, for example, if that's your kind of thing. Now what we're going to be using today is this template repository that I made quite a little while ago now, actually, but for before, all I've ever had is this written tutorial, which I thought was pretty good, but some people would really like a video on how to do it themselves, We're also going to be using a program called GitKraken, which is a Git client where you're basically copying a GitHub repo from the website onto your local machine and then making adjustments and sending it back to GitHub. That's what a GitHub client is. There are a few, but I recommend GitKraken, this guy right here, and I'll put a little link down in the description in order to do that. The other thing that you're also going to need in order to do this is Python. So you're going to need to install Python, particularly Python 3, as that is the newest Python. It's actually right now 3.9.1, but any Python 3 version will do. I'm also going to put a little link down in the description for that, because installing Python is something that is basically unrelated to Kodi. It's just something else for running the little script that we're going to need in order to build our repo, and a little bit outside of the scope of this particular tutorial. But to get started, we're actually just going to follow down this tutorial. So it says, in order to follow this tutorial, please fork this repository and then clone your newly forked copy locally. So in order to do that, you're going to hit this button right here, use this template, and it's going to ask you to make a new repository. So for us, we're going to call it repository.tutorial, very easy, and create the repository from a template. It takes a couple of seconds, as it says, but then we're going to have a new repository on GitHub. Okay, and we're going to clone it. So using GitKraken, there are a couple ways, but the easiest way we're going to do is actually we're just going to get this URL right here and copy it, and go back to GitKraken and clone a repo. You can just paste it right in here, and I have a folder here set up, tutorial, that we're going to use. We're just going to clone it in there. And I have it right here. So this is a copy of that repository from GitHub. Okay. We'll just go ahead and open that in GitKraken. We will need it in a little bit. So the next step is, first you'll need to edit the addon.xml file within the folder, and I'm going to show you that right now. We also need to replace a couple of things in the long URLs that are in that folder, and we can change the summary and the description as well. So we're going to do that. So back in this folder here, this is our copy of our GitHub folder, and this folder right here is going to be what we're going to call our actual repository add-on. For anybody that's familiar with this, the very first thing that you do when you install a custom repo inside of Kodi is you usually go install from zip, and you've put in somebody's URL, and then you're going to install their repository zip, which adds a repository into Kodi, and then you install from that repository other add-ons. So that's what this is going to be right here. So we can go into this, and here's the addon.xml. I use Notepad++, but you can use basically any text editor to do this. You want to make sure that you don't have it set to wrap the lines, word wrap. You want them to go ahead and just be in this format. So the first thing we're going to change is the add-on ID, which for us, we're going to call it the same thing we called it on GitHub. It doesn't necessarily have to be, but that's what we're going to use. It has to be an add-on ID that Kodi will recognize. That's the important part. We're going to change the name, and I'm just going to call it tutorial repository. And the version, we're going to call 1.0 just for funsies. The provider name can also be anything, but most people like to use their username, myself included, so we'll call it Dr. Inferno right there. Okay, and the summary and description, we'll just call the same thing, tutorial repository. And this is going to be tutorial on how to set up a GitHub-hosted Kodi repo. How about? Perfect. Okay, now this is the important part. So these URLs, basically when Kodi tries to use this repository, it uses these URLs to find the actual files for the add-ons so that it can install them. So where it says your username here, you're going to put your username. Simple. Your username here, whoops, you're going to put your username. This is your GitHub username, of course. Okay, and then here where it says your repository name here, we're going to use this right here. Okay, so we're calling it repository.tutorial, and I'm just going to copy this. Goes right here, repository name here. Goes right here, repository name here. And then where it says branch name here, you're going to use the branch. So for us, it's master. You can get a little bit trickier with this and, for example, have one branch with the Leia version of your repo and one branch with the matrix version of your repo and some things like that. But that is a little more advanced and definitely not for your first try. Okay? So now we're basically completely done with this file. I'm going to leave it open because I'm going to show a little bit more in it later, but for now we're just going to save. Okay, we can put that away for now. You can obviously change the artwork here. This is example artwork that I put into the template. We're not going to touch it for this, but you definitely can. And this gives a little bit of a guideline on how they should be sized and what kind of file they should be so that you can use them. And then we're going to change back here. We could have done this earlier, doesn't really make any difference. We're just going to rename this folder so that it matches, whoops, so that it matches our add-on ID. Okay? So this folder, repository.tutorial, contains these files that have our add-ons information in them, if that makes any sense. Okay, and then it says next, place the add-on source folders for whichever add-ons you'd like to be contained in your Kodi repo into the main folder of this repository and run this Py script. Okay, so basically that's going to be right here in this folder. For this example, I have a small add-on that I made on GitHub not quite a year ago. This was just something that I made as an example to show off a bug. I just made something that would reproduce a bug. So basically this plugin does nothing useful. But we can use it as an example of something that you can put into a repo. So what you do, same thing. You go and get this URL and copy it. For us, we're going to clone this repo. You could also unzip a zip file of an add-on that you want to add, or just copy the source folder from somewhere else on your hard drive if you wanted to. But we're just going to do it with Gitkraken. So we can clone that URL, and we're just going to put it actually inside of the folder that we cloned before. That just makes it a little bit simpler so that you don't have to copy it back and forth, okay? And we can open it if we want. It'll show basically, you know, the history of that repository, which is all right here as well. So we don't really need it, we can close it. But if you go back and look in the tutorial folder, we do now have the repository that we just edited, okay? And we have this example program. And now that we have those, we can just run this script. Now if you've got Python set up already, it's pretty simple. You can just run it and run it as a Python file. For this tutorial, I'm actually going to run it inside of a terminal window, a PowerShell window, pardon me, so that we can actually see what it says. So it's pretty simple here. For me, it's just py. For some installs of Pi or some different platforms and stuff, this may be a little bit different. But the important part is what this file spits out. Whoops, not XML, Pi. Okay. So you could even see up here, it did a little bit of something when it was doing that, but it tells us exactly what it did. It found an add-on that it's creating a zip for plugin.program.example version 003, and a new add-on that it created a zip for repository.tutorial version 1.0. This line right here is not really important. It's just a warning that this folder repo does not actually contain an add-on, which is fine. This is what we're going to use to show it inside of Kodi, and that's no big deal. Then it also says it finished updating addons.xml and md5 files. So basically you can just see that this is working, all good. If you just run it like it's a program, it'll do all that and then it'll close the window and you won't be able to see what happened. So I wanted to run it like that so that we could see. So now we have this zips folder that got created. This is all generated stuff, and in general I would say don't ever actually modify the files inside of the zips folder. What you're going to want to do is modify the files here, and then run your script one more time. But what this did is it made a little info file, an addon.xml copy of each of the ones that we had in there, and a zip file to go with it. Same thing here, your little info files, and then a zip file to go with it. Oh, I went one too far back. And then it made the addons.xml, which is what Kodi's going to look at to see which add-ons are available in your repo. And it made an MD5 file that it's going to compare against to see if there have been changes in your repository since the last time it checked. So that's all the setup there. Now, we'll go back to the tutorial real quick. It says what I just said. It creates zips of all the desired add-ons, places them in the zip folder, along with generated XML and MD5 files. Now what we want to do is copy the zip file of the repository, which we made. It's inside of the zips folder, add-on ID, which is your repository ID, and the version. So zips, our repository folder, and then it's this zip file right here, repository.tutorial-1.0.zip. And we're going to copy that, like so, and then go to this repo folder. And you just want to paste it right inside here. Paste. Okay. And then inside of that repo folder, there's an index.html, which we're just going to edit very quickly so that it points towards this file. So we're going to open that up in your text editor, and repository.tutorial-1.0.zip. And I'm just going to copy that into here as well. This is just an A tag, that's an HTML link. And if you were to try to open this in a browser, for example, it just looks like this. A blank page with one link on it, and that's important. Okay? So now we're going to commit these changes and push them to GitHub so that we can actually make them be live. So inside GitKraken again, we can see all the changes that we've made. These are the changes that we made to our addon.xml that defines the repository. We didn't actually change these art files, but we changed the name of the folder they're in, so they show up as changed files. These are the changes that we made in the HTML file and that we put a zip there. So we're going to stage these. And we're going to stage these. And then inside the zips folder, we can see all the generated files that it made. So it's zips files that it made, and the XML and the MD5. I'm just going to stage that entire folder. Perfect. Ooh, that didn't like that very much. But they're there. They're staged. Not sure where that happened, but it's all good now. Okay, those are all staged. Now this folder the plugin.program.example folder is actually itself a GitHub repo. You can actually stage this. When I make a repository, I typically don't, because GitHub kind of knows that it's there already, and you don't need it. Once you have these zip files generated, you don't actually need to keep tracking this folder anymore. We'll just stage it for now, because it's simple and we can stage everything. And then we say some commit message. It could be anything really, but I tend to make them a little bit descriptive. We followed the tutorial. Okay. And we can tell my online copy is still back here. This is my local copy. Whoops. Local. So we push that to the origin, which means that we're sending it to GitHub, our changes. And if we refresh this page, we'll be able to see those new files that we created, including the generated ones and everything that we just pushed 24 seconds ago. Now, in order to make this public, is also pretty simple. After committing and pushing these changes to your repo, go to the settings section for this repository on GitHub. You can change the repository name if you want to, but then we also need to activate GitHub pages. Now, if you do change the name, say you change it to whatever your username.github.io, then it makes your file manager source really friendly. It's your username.github.io/repo. Okay, I already have a repository that's drinferno.github.io because that's where my repository with my add-ons is. So I'm not going to name it that. I'm just going to leave it as repository.tutorial, and then it will look like this. It'll be drinferno.github.io / this repository's name and then /repo. Okay, but what we're going to do is go to settings, just like I said, and this is where you would change that name if you wanted to. Okay, and we're going to scroll way down here to GitHub pages. Now we're going to pick the master branch because that's where everything is right now, and just hit save. So if we go back here, and if I get a hold of this URL, I'm going to open that in a new tab. And our repository was called repository.tutorial. It's right here. So this is the index page that we modified back here that points at this zip. Now if you take this link and add it as a file manager source inside Kodi, and then go to install from zip, pick that source, you're going to be able to install this zip. For this tutorial, I'm actually going to be removing this repository off of GitHub basically as soon as I'm done recording. But when you do it, you'll have something like this that says your username and possibly your repository name and then a /repo. And when you add that in Kodi, you can install this zip, which will install that repository, and inside that repository will be your repo and your add-on, or whichever add-ons you put in here. You can do many, many, many of them if you like, and that totally works out. So there you go. Like I said, I will put a couple of links in the bottom for things like how to install Python, how to install Kodi, how to install Gitkraken so that you can use it, but that's pretty much it. You now have a live and working Kodi repository. You can put more stuff in here, commit it to GitHub, and those add-ons will show up inside Kodi whenever it checks for updates again. So thanks for watching, and maybe I'll see you next time.